Could the Phillies make some major changes in the infield this offseason and add a couple of star players, or maybe even one? Find out who they could be on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Locked On Phillies, your number one place for daily Monday through Friday Philadelphia Phillies content. You might know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for over 6 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for the past 4 seasons, and this is now my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. We've got a double dose of free agent potential fits on today's episode, or at least breakdowns. And we're focusing mainly on the infield today. 2 big-time names that'll be available this offseason that could fit in Philadelphia. Will they? Well, we'll look at, first and foremost, the shortstop position and Bo Bichette, who might be a World Series champion when everything's said and done tonight. Happy Halloween, by the way, recording this on Friday. So hopefully you're having a good holiday. And then we're also going to look at someone who's already a World Series champion, Alex Bregman, the leadership he could bring, a position that may open up if the Phillies trade Alec Bohm. We will talk about Alec Bregman. It's so hard to do Alex and Alec back-to-back when talking about third baseman. Anyway, I'll soldier through. I'm a tough podcast host. We'll talk about Alex Bregman in our second segment. And our final segment, we're going to, because it's Halloween, talk about the scariest things facing the Phillies right now. Yeah, spooky, right? Well, let's start off with this look at what's going on with the Phillies and the potential of adding Bo Bichette. By the way, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Bo Bichette's a very interesting player because unlike some of the other guys we've looked at so far, he's on the younger side of the free agent class, 2025-26. He's only 27 years old. He just crushes contact hitting, like just absolutely bat-to-ball skills through the roof. Solid defensive player, has led the American League in hits before, and this is a guy that if you add to this lineup, greatly increases their chance of putting runners on base for the big-time stars. Now, when you look at the salary comparisons, and I'm using one of the Athletics articles for this, but they're looking at Willie Adames' 7-year, $182 million deal. Dansby Swanson's 7-year, $177 million deal. All of these comp salaries that they have or comp contracts that they have are in the 7-year, $175 million range. It's expensive, but is it doable? If the Phillies were to trade Nick Castellanos and not re-sign JT Realmuto and not re-sign Ranger Suarez, and maybe Kyle Schwarber isn't as expensive as some people believe he's going to be, there's a way that the Philadelphia Phillies could make that work. Now, it would leave them very strapped for cash based on the projected payroll that Dave Dombrowski says he has to work with. It would basically be their only notable offseason acquisition. So we'll see. Fit for Bo Bichette, because we're ranking all of the free agents on fit, cost, and whether or not it's realistic that they end up with the Philadelphia Phillies. Fit, I'm going to go with a medium for Bo Bichette because the middle infield is a little crowded for the Phillies right now. You could go ahead and play him at short and move Trea Turner to second, though, and then move on from Bryson Stott. And then Mundo Sosa just becomes a utility guy, or maybe you play him at third base if you move Alec Bohm until Aiden Miller's ready. So there's a way you can do it. It's just not a very clean fit as far as what the Phillies need. They don't really look like a team that's in the market for a shortstop, even though I know how some people feel about Trea Turner in this town. But adding another guy, right? Let's say they were to do this, and then you have Bo Bichette and Trea Turner and Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper at the top of the lineup. You now have 2 contact hitters. Bo Bichette had an injury this year that cost him a good part of his regular season. If he had continued to play, there's a pretty darn good chance he would have led the American League in hits. Trea Turner led the National League in batting average. You could have had, or you could have, those 2 guys on the same team next year. And the most intriguing thing about this would be that it completely flips the narrative of who the Phillies are as an offensive baseball team. When you have 2 guys in Turner and Bichette, you now go from a we have to hit the ball out of the ballpark team to a we can hit for average. We're going to create opportunities. Sure, guys will still hit home runs here and there, but we become much more of a contact team. That's something that a lot of people have been looking for the Philadelphia Phillies to do. Some people believe that it's a more stable approach, especially in the postseason when the situations ratchet up and the pitching gets so much better, of continuing success, not having these games that we've seen the Phillies have so many times where it's just strikeout after strikeout after strikeout. And Bo Bichette is also a player that's just entering his prime, so you wouldn't have to worry about, if you bring him in, another long contract to an aging star. No, let's say you give him a 7-year deal that takes him through his his age 34 season. That's not crazy. The Phillies might be about to sign a catcher who's already at that point to a 2 or 3 year deal in JT Realmuto. So Bo Bichette would be a great addition. Again, the fit's only a medium, mid-level because of the middle infield situation right now for the Phils. It's easy as a fan to say, just move Turner over, whatever, make it work. This isn't MLB The Show. You can't just flip positions that easily. You got to have conversations with guys and everything. And I'm not saying that that's impossible to do. I'm saying that factoring into the decision of whether or not you want to make a full swing at Bo Bichette in free agency could affect this. The cost, like most of these guys that we're talking about early on, will be high. The realistic possibility, I'm going to put it as low because of all of those things I just brought up. The fit is going to be questionable. I don't know if it's going to be something that the Phillies value enough as far as another contact hitter. You already have Trea Turner locked down. He fills that role for this team. So like adding a second Trea Turner and a younger, maybe better version of Trea Turner, but doing that might feel like too much investment on doubling up on the same player. The counter argument to that would be, well, Bryce Harper, power guy, strikes out a bunch. Kyle Schwarber, power guy, strikes out a bunch. Like Nick Castellanos strikes out a bunch. Like the Phillies have already doubled down on a player kind of archetype with the way that they built this team as it currently stands. So maybe they could do that, but I don't think Bo Bichette's going to be in play. And the other reason is, if you're a team without a shortstop, a long-term shortstop, and the Phillies are not one of those teams, because Trea Turner's going to be here a while, whether you like it or not, you're probably making a heftier swing at Bo Bichette to say this could be a franchise cornerstone for us. And hey, who's to say that if Toronto doesn't win the World Series, they don't prioritize re-signing him this offseason? So Bo Bichette's a very interesting case, and that would be one of these outside-of-the-box moves that maybe Dave Dombrowski has on his big board, but the Phillies these past couple of off seasons have been more chalk than they have been experimental. We need a player at this position. We get a player at this position. They fit the type of team we're trying to build. It really hasn't been a grouping of surprise moves by Dave Dombrowski. Juan Duran could have predicted it. Harrison Bader could have predicted it. Jordan Romano could have predicted it. Max Kepler could have predicted it. Joe Ross could have predicted it. Austin Hayes. Just go through the list of players they've acquired. Jesus Luzardo is the one outside of that way of thinking, because no one was really looking at the Phillies to add starting pitching this offseason. So it can happen, But remember, that wasn't free agency. That was via a trade, which is a totally different scenario than dropping $175 million and 7 years on a player like Bo Bichette. So I don't think that's going to happen, but he's a really intriguing player for how he could almost single-handedly change the way that you look at the Philadelphia Phillies offense. So you can let me know in the comments if you like the idea of adding Bo Bichette to this roster. I do. I think there's too many little roadblock ticks of how he could fit and where he would play that makes the Phillies not going to be, or it brings them a little lower in the pecking order for who could go out there and sign Bo Bichette. But another guy could be added to the infield, and I think this one is much more realistic. If one move happens, it becomes hyper realistic. Could Alex Bregman really be a Philly? We'll talk about it as we continue today's episode. But first, we got to talk about Prize Picks because you and I make decisions every day. But on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, let me tell you about it. Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. That's it. And if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make a Prize Picks lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So I've been using Prize Picks a lot during the NFL season because stats in the NFL seem to be pretty darn easy to track, especially when you look at the big-time players. A lot of guys have been pretty consistent this year, the top performers. Jonathan Taylor, Patrick Mahomes, since he's gotten things going. Guys that are having good years, they do it week in and week out, and that's why I love football. And you just take Mahomes, for example, who we talked about. Take him more on his passing yards, more on his passing touchdowns, 2 stats, 1 player, simple enough. Chiefs have a big game. You're a winner. That's why Prize Picks is so easy. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. So they got some little checks and balances in there to make sure you're having a great time. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. This is where we get really interesting when you start to look at the free agent class of 2025, 2026. This dude could fit. It'll just take one move. So Alex Bregman is going to opt out of his deal with the Boston Red Sox. Of course, we know him from his time with the Houston Astros, but he's going to hit free agency. Now, at 31 years old, wanting a long-term deal is something the teams are going to have to massage a little bit if they want to sign Bregman, because I do not expect teams to be kicking down the door to sign a 31-year-old to, I don't know, a 7, 8, 9, 10-year deal and take him till he's 40 years old. That might be the Phillies' MO when you look at some of their contracts, but I don't know that the market's going to be all that hot for Bregman on a long-term contract. He's asking a lot, which is why the Phillies could be able to sneak in here. But there's one domino that needs to fall first before Alex Bregman would be on the table for the Phillies. If the Phils look at their roster and say, we need change for change's sake, and I want them to say that this offseason, because trotting back the same team over and over and over again, it hasn't worked. So at some point, you got to just swap out some pieces. Doesn't matter. It's almost like rotating your tires. And you might think, what's the real point? Is it that big of a deal? But it can make a big difference when you just swap player X for player Y, even if they look relatively similar. But the upside of this is in production, Bregman and Bohm do not look similar. So let's say the Phillies were to trade Alec Bohm and get back, I don't know, a minor league arm or two, and just move on from Bohm and clear up that spot at third base for where you think Aiden Miller could be playing eventually. Then you go out and you sign Alex Bregman, and you bring in a guy who, you talk about championship pedigree. He is a multi-time World Series champion. And I saw a lot of the comments when I talked about Framber Valdez in an earlier episode this week. Don't want anyone from the Astros. Not a good culture guy. Don't want anyone from the trash can team. I understand that sentiment. And you can say, yeah, sure, Bregman won, but questions about the Astros, asterisk, totally fair to bring that up when evaluating a player. But here's what I will say. He was fighting a quad injury this past year with the Red Sox, and he still went out and slashed 273, 360, 462. 28 doubles, 18 home runs. So the power number's nothing crazy, but remember, we're comparing him to Alec Bohm, who's normally a 10 to 15 home run guy, it appears, in his career, or at least was this year. Probably no more than like 15 home runs a year is what you can count on for Alec Bohm. So in a down year for Bregman, he already is adding more pop at the position. 62 RBIs, which would probably improve if he was added to the Philadelphia Phillies lineup with a guy like Trea Turner potentially batting ahead of him, or Bryce Harper being a part of the lineup, Kyle Schwarber if he's re-signed. Bregman just makes so much sense if the Phillies do move on from Alec Bohm, which is why I'm putting his fit, pending a Bohm trade, at high. If you're not going to move Alec Bohm, obviously Bregman doesn't fit here because the position is not open. But I've already speculated that the Phillies could look to move Bohm. And if you think that's a crazy, out of left field proposal, they tried to trade him last year. They just couldn't get the value they were looking for, and then decided, hey, we'll keep him. And Bohm didn't have a terrible year, but he had a he had a good year, right? But he had a very Alec Bohm year. Little bit of pop here, solid defense, create some run scoring opportunities, have a couple hot stretches where you look really darn good, but it's singles and doubles. He just doesn't have the pop of the third baseman that you envision when you look at a World Series winning team. And that's a tough thing to look at with this Phillies squad, just from an aesthetic point of view. Now, should you build your team on aesthetics? No, not necessarily. The Blue Jays are throwing a 22-year-old guy who started the season low A ball. The aesthetics of that would be, against the Dodgers, you're getting cooked. And meanwhile, Trey Savage is going nuts in the World Series. So aesthetic doesn't rule the day. But at this point, it would be something that you could change to maybe get this fan base a little excited again about what the team could put together. So fit, if Bohm's traded, it's high. If Bohm's not traded, it's low. So that's the domino that needs to fall. Cost is high again. Alex Bregman's going to go out and get some money. His contract comparisons anywhere from $180 million on a 7-year deal to the Rafael Devers 10-year, $313 million deal. Now that one clearly it did not work out, or at least hasn't worked out to this point. Anyway, you're looking at a situation where you'd have to pay a majorly expensive deal to an aging player. So if the Phillies do this, here's the downside of going on a high-cost 31-year-old like Bregman who wants a 7, 8, 9, 10-year deal. At that point, you are saying we do not care about 2029, 30, 31, 32. Like, we don't give a damn about those years. We're probably going to stink when that time rolls around and we have late 30s, Harper, Nola, Turner, Schwarber, Bregman, right? That would be insane. And also, it would be tough to sign Bregman if you're re-signing Schwarber as well. That would be a really tough thing monetarily to make work unless you really spread out the money in this deal. And that could mean going to the 9 or 10-year side of the 7 to 10-year range. So I don't really like the idea of adding another long-term aging contract for somebody who hasn't been in-house. But if you move on from Alec Bohm and the question is who's playing third for this team, you might be forced into that. And you might just say, screw it, we've come this far. Here's another aging star for you. Let's just see if it works. The Dodgers have won with that strategy. The problem is their aging stars are more postseason productive than the Philadelphia Phillies. Finally, the realistic possibility. I'm going to put this one as a medium. And the only thing that flips it to high or low, right, that pushes the scale on the realistic probability is what we talked about with the potential of an Alec Bohm trade. You'll be shocked if the Phillies trade Alec Bohm to see, not that they trade him, because I've told you multiple times, it's a potential move this offseason, but to see how clearly the path to Alex Bregman opens up if there's an opening at third base. He fits so well what this team needs. You're looking at a guy where, okay, solid defense, right-handed bat, championship pedigree, good locker room guy from all accounts, right? And take that as you will from his time in Houston. I'll say it again, but that's a guy that could work here if the Phillies decide that they've had enough of Alec Bohm over there at third base. So Bregman, potential option, better option or more likely option than Bo Bichette, in my opinion. But two big-time infield names that will be out there that it will be very interesting to see what happens with those players. And a 27-year-old and a 31-year-old wanting about the same length of contract, something's got to give there because they're both not getting it. Coming up next, a little Halloween segment for you. We're going to talk about the scariest things facing the Phillies right now. It may not be fun, but it's a spooky holiday, and we're going to talk about the scary potential future of the Fightin' Phils. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though. Nothing scary about FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. There's some great things on FanDuel. You could bet like second by second, minute by minute, quarter by quarter, half by half, or game by game. Earlier this week, I hit a Cleveland, Boston first half over because both those teams start hot. Nailed it. Didn't even have to watch the second half of the game because I don't root for either of those teams. FanDuel's the best for that. Also, I'm heading out to the Sixers game tonight. Sixers 4-0. Maybe some futures bets on them. You can do a lot of stuff on FanDuel. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We got a spooky Halloween topic for you today. Happy Halloween to everybody out there. And thank you so much for joining us on a holiday. But there's a lot of you that join us every day, part of our Everydayers Club, who every single time we post Locked On Phillies, you are zoned in, and I appreciate that so much. If you want to be a part of that and not miss any great Philadelphia Phillies content, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube. Yeah, you can watch the show on YouTube, and subscribing is free and easy. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted, so you never miss anything. And if you don't have time to watch or you're listening while you're driving or something, we're available wherever you get your podcasts as well. I'd love it if you're listening to us in podcast form, if you could rate and review. So thank you so much for joining us, however you join us on Locked On Phillies day in and day out. The scariest things facing the Philadelphia Phillies right now, what are they? I've compiled a little bit of a list here, and there are a lot of scary things for Philadelphia Phillies fans as we sit here on Halloween night 2025. The number one scariest thing for the Philadelphia Phillies right now, though, has to be the current contract situation of their core players on both sides of the coin. Bryce Harper, Trea Turner, Aaron Nola, long-term deals. Did Aaron Nola have a good year? No. Did Bryce Harper have a Bryce Harper year? No. Now, I think he could get back to it. I think Nola could potentially get back to it. And Trea Turner did have a really good year. But we know that there are deficiencies in his game. Defensively, feels like he comes up small more often than not in the postseason. So those three guys you have locked down a long, long time. On the other side of the coin, let's look at some other guys in your core. Nick Castellanos, probably getting traded. Kyle Schwarber, heading to free agency. JT Realmuto, heading to free agency. So you got more guys that you're probably going to have to pay, or they're going to try to, and we'll see if they can or not. The Phillies, I'll tell you right now, if you are anti-giving out the long-term contracts to players in their mid-30s, if you re-sign Kyle Schwarber, then re-sign JT Realmuto, those fans who feel that way are going to be mad. If you don't, the team's going to be bad. So what do? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that's why it's so tough, because they're roped into this nightmare of it's got to be these guys. And every year it feels like it's not going to be these guys. So what do? That's the tough part of Dave Dombrowski's job, where he's caught very much between a rock and a hard place. All right, what else is scary about the Philadelphia Phillies right now? The idea that history could be showing us what the future is for the Philadelphia Phillies. So the Phillies went out in 2022 and went to the World Series. Then in 23, they lost in the NLCS. And in 24, they lost in the DS. And 25, they lost in the DS again. The Phillies in 2008, which, by the way, we are now, do some math here, 25 to 2008, where it's the anniversary of the World Series parade back in 2008, which was a great day here in the city of Philadelphia. It is now, 10, 15, 13, 18 years? I'm an idiot. I can't do math. That might have been the dumbest attempt at math that you probably ever heard. Hope you enjoyed the World Series parade if you were around for it back in 2008 and got a chance to go. Feels like forever ago. But in 2008, they win that World Series. 2009, they go back. 2010, they lose in the League Championship Series. 2009 or 11, they lose in the DS. And then they miss the postseason altogether in 12, and everything's all over. And they go through a decade-long postseason drought. That's the scariest thing about where the Phillies are at right now, because it's impossible to look at the downward postseason trajectory of this team and say they're not doing that again. The only difference, this year you don't even have this couple of years, you don't even have a World Series to show for it. That's terrifying, because we're heading into another decade-long drought period, which I don't think we are. I think they're going to continue to make the playoffs, because I think this core is a little bit more sustainable and the farm system isn't terrible like it was back in 2012. But that's going to be something that Phillies fans look at and say, it's hard not to think about that 08 core, just minus the World Series. And that could be a miserable stretch and potentially a long stretch of bad Phillies baseball. Another thing that's scary with the Philadelphia Phillies right now, Zach Wheeler, right? Now everything, according to the Phillies, is progressing as expected with his thoracic outlet syndrome and the blood clot that he had the procedure for. And maybe he's back next year and everything's fine. But even if he is, the Phillies are going to have to start to prepare for life without Zach Wheeler. Let's say he's never the same after this, because that has happened before with this injury for major league pitchers. If you're never the same after this, and the Phillies lose that guy who's been such a big part of their success in this era, the pitching staff all of a sudden goes from a assumed strength to a potential weakness. And Andrew Painter, a lot gets heaped on his shoulders, which is why he's such an important piece of the puzzle, as is Justin Crawford, as is Aiden Miller. But the future status of Zach Wheeler and slowly watching him fade from his time as one of the best pitchers on the planet to what feels like he's going to be gone in a flash from the Philadelphia Phillies. Not only is it sad because we love Zach Wheeler. He's one of the greatest free agent acquisitions in the history of Philadelphia sports. But it's scary to think about how you have to try and make up for that going forward. And one more thing that I think is really scary, and this is pure speculation, we'll end on this today for today's episode, is Dave Dombrowski, is Rob Thompson, is this Phillies core of the people making the decisions right now? John Middleton's going to be here, but are they thinking long-term? Dave Dombrowski, people have speculated around baseball that he will be interested in going to become the first president of baseball operations for a new expansion franchise. People have brought up Nashville if and when they get a team. Could he bounce? And then the Phillies are left in the lurch trying to say, well, you signed all these long-term contracts for players, and now we got to deal with the fallout of that. Rob Thompson, I don't know how much longer he's going to manage. And some people might say, oh, that's a good thing. But the guy does get the team to the postseason. If, let's say, things collapse here and the lockout happens and Rob Thompson says, oh, I'm hanging it up. And, oh, Dave Dombrowski says, I'm getting out of here, so I'll start fresh when the lockout ends and everything down in Nashville or wherever it's going to be with an expansion team, then the Phillies are in a position where you say, our leadership structure just set us up for failure and bounced. That is just pure speculation, but that would be worst case DEFCON 1. And the one other scary thing right now, pray that we have baseball in 2027, because a year without baseball would be a year that's no good. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hopefully you enjoy your Halloween night. Everyone be safe, get some candy, and I will talk to you Monday on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.